Thanks for coming today. I'm Jeff Reymar, a Word Program Manager, and I'm going to be telling you about custom smart tags, a feature of Office 10. Smart tags is an umbrella term for a couple different features in Office 10. The features fall into two categories. First, there are buttons that appear in user documents that are really targeted at putting the user back in control. In the past, we've had some problems with people having difficulty pasting and getting the right format, and having autocorrect in some cases go a bit wild on them. These smart tags for paste options and autocorrect options put users back in control and let them make choices about the paste format and whether autocorrect should fire on what they've typed. But that's not what I'm going to tell you about today. Instead, I'm going to tell you about the other aspect of smart tags, something that I'll refer to in this presentation as custom smart tags. The goal of custom smart tags is to offer users actions, things that they can do with text in their document by virtue of the type of text that it is. And this is really a feature that's going to be part of the .NET framework as we move forward. So the goals for custom smart tags are really twofold. First of all, it's a mechanism for automatically labeling strings with a type. And the type in this case is information that relates to something a person would know about that string if they saw it in a document. So for example, when you're reading a mail message or a document and you see the name Bill Gates, the first thing you know about that string is that it is, in fact, a person's name. Bill Gates represents a person out in the world. And if you saw something like 12/15/2000, you as a person would know that that string represented a date. These are things that in the past, except in structured documents like databases, computers weren't typically aware of. So one of the goals of smart tags is to enable computers, Word and Excel being the applications in this case on the computer, to know the type associated with a particular string when it appears in a document. That's the beginning, but the real goal is to simplify everyday tasks. So the way we intend to do this with smart tags is to make it easy to link data in documents, Word documents, mail messages, and spreadsheets to other data and other applications, either on the web, on your computer, somewhere on the intranet. And to some extent, you can think about this as making documents more object-oriented. Right now, Word documents and Excel spreadsheets have some structure, but through smart tags, we hope to bring more structure and enable users to work on them in ways that are kind of object-oriented. So for instance, from a person's name, you as a human being know that there are things you can do with that person's name, like send the person email, look them up in your contacts folder, check a web telephone directory to see what their phone number is. These are the sort of things that we hope to enable using smart tags. So I'll go through a simple task today, and this is a task that might be enabled by an e-commerce company. Imagine that you receive mail from a friend, and the friend says to you, I just listened to this CD, and I think it's great, and in particular, I think it's something you might be interested in. So while reading that mail message, you might make the decision that you want to buy that CD. Then you'd go through the steps outlined on this slide. You'd first read the mail message. If you were a savvy user, you'd probably cut and paste the name of the album. And the reason you do that is so that you could use it later in a web search engine, for instance, or on an e-commerce site. You'd then know to open your browser and navigate to a particular CD shop, maybe CD Now, or maybe eShop at Microsoft, something like that. But you'd have to recall the name of that CD shop, unless you bookmarked it. Once you got to the CD shop, you'd go through the process of pasting the name into a search field and running a search to find out whether the CD shop sold that album. You'd then buy the album by adding it to your shopping cart, and finally you'd check out. So that's 8 steps today. Now, with smart tags, we hope to reduce a number of these steps. So the same task, we hope to get down to a mere 3 steps. The first step has to be the same. You have to read the mail message or else you won't know to buy the CD. And after that, things become considerably different. Hopefully, you'll be able to just click buy and buy the CD from the document without going to the web using a smart tag action. So once you use the smart tag action, the browser would open, the navigation to the CD store would happen automatically, the name of the CD would be passed in, and the only remaining step for you would be to check out. So if we enabled this, then we'd get 8 of the steps from the initial task of buying that CD down to a mere 5. And in particular, we'd save some of the steps that were most onerous. In particular, we'd save the most cognitively demanding, the one that requires the user to remember the name of the CD shop. Okay, you can do this with a bookmark today and have the browser remember the name of that CD shop for you. But still, it must be easier to start from the name of the CD you're interested in purchasing in the document and end up automatically in the browser. You still eliminate the steps of opening the browser window, finding the bookmark in your bookmarks folder, and so forth. We also hope to eliminate the most tedious step, and that is either typing the URL or copying the URL from a particular place, as well as typing or copying and pasting the name of the CD that you're interested in. So let me go into a little bit more depth about what the goals are. We certainly want to save users time and make documents more object-oriented, but in particular, how do we want to do this? Well, we want to eliminate a couple things. First, we want to eliminate the knowledge of the uses of a particular string. So in the example about buying the CD, you as the recipient of the mail message had to know that there were CD stores on the web. But if you didn't know that, then you were stuck. You couldn't buy the CD from home or from work. You had to go to a physical store. But in some cases, there are multiple uses for things. And some users may know some of them, others may know other uses. But we want to make it easy. We want to provide a list of the uses in a way that's actionable in the document by the smart tags mechanism. The other thing we want to eliminate is the process of shuffling data from one application to another. This task of cutting the name of the CD from the document, going to the web, pasting the name of the CD in again. These are just steps that are tedious and error-prone, and if you retype, maybe you make a spelling mistake, things like that. And we hope to eliminate these with smart tags by making it more seamless, having the data moved from the document to the application that needs that data automatically without retyping, without cutting and pasting. You can also think about this as the process of extending the hyperlink. The hyperlink today is something that typically is typed, it's applied manually. Other than recognizing hyperlinks in documents when they're typed, there's no automatic process of adding hyperlinks to documents. And even if there were, then hyperlinks have the limitation that they only point to a single destination. So for instance, if I wanted to take the name of a CD in a document and link it to a place that I could buy the CD from, as well as a place that listed information about the band who played that CD, I'd be stuck. I'd need two hyperlinks. That's just because you can't apply more than one hyperlink to a string, and a single hyperlink can't point to multiple places. The smart tag mechanism essentially extends upon this and gives what you can think of as multiple destinations to a single piece of data. It's also possible for smart tags to change the content of documents. There are a number of examples where you might like to do things automatically with a hyperlink, but essentially you can't because the thing that you'd like to do involves changing the content of the document. I'll go into depth in a couple of slides about exactly what these things mean, since they may be a bit abstract. But first, I'm going to tell you exactly what a smart tag is. A smart tag is a label for a string and optionally some metadata. So the labels typically represent things people understand. Bill Gates hopefully would be labeled as a person's name. MSFT hopefully would be labeled as a stock ticker symbol. December 15th would be labeled as a date. In a particular company, something like XY1234 might be labeled as a part number. Now, part numbers are a bit different than stock ticker symbols and dates and people's names in that they're typically specific to an organization or a group of organizations, and maybe in some cases even specific to an individual. And that's one of the things that provides the most power about smart tags. They're extensible. So not only can we capture general categories that are applicable in a broad variety of domains, but we can capture ones that are specific to an individual, a company, an organization, a university, something like that. So to go into a bit of additional depth, an example here. If I type MSFT in a document, and when I say document, I'm talking about a Word document, a Word mail message as well, since Word is the default mail editor for email messages created by Outlook in Office 10, or a cell in an Excel spreadsheet. So if I've typed MSFT in one of those places, then today, that is before the next version of Office, that is just text. It's just the characters M, S, F, and T. Certainly I could apply a hyperlink to it, or I could do some annotation around that. I could say that it was a stock ticker symbol in the text. But there's nothing that happens automatically today that indicates that MSFT is in fact a stock ticker symbol. That's what smart tag annotations will bring. So once I type that in Word or Excel, What hopefully would happen, and will happen with Office 10, is that it would be labeled as a stock ticker symbol. And it would be labeled this way because we have a database of stock ticker symbols that resides on the user's machine. And while they type, their text is compared to entries in that database to see if there are any stock tickers in it. So what would happen is shown at the bottom of the slide. MSFT would appear in your document as it had before, but behind it, at a level where the application is aware of, but hidden from the user, would be some information about what type that string was. So in this case, it would be labeled as a stock ticker symbol, and it would be labeled that way using some tags and some XML. So in this case, it would be labeled as URN schemas Microsoft-com, Money Central, stock ticker symbol, for instance. Smart tags, as I said, do use XML. This is one of the things that makes them extensible and powerful and enables them to be used with lots of standard tools. So the types for smart tags are associated with a particular schema. So in the example from the previous slide, the schema was schemas Microsoft-com, Money Central. In addition to being associated with a schema, they're tied to a particular tag in that namespace. So in the case of a stock ticker symbol, the tag might be literally called stock ticker. In addition to the tag and the schema, the namespace that the tag is in, there's arbitrary metadata that can be embedded along with a smart tag as well. So attribute value pairs can be set. These might be things like the name of the company is Microsoft. That could be applied to a stock ticker symbol, MSFT, when it was recognized. To make this a bit more concrete, some examples are, in the case of MSFT, well, it would be labeled as a stock ticker, as I said, and we might have that value, company equals Microsoft. What you see on this slide is what you would see if you looked at the HTML representation of a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet, or if you looked at the XML representation of an Excel spreadsheet, since Excel 10 actually supports saving to XML. So on this slide are examples for a stock ticker symbol, a part number, an album. On this slide, only the first one is something that will ship in Office 10. We'll have code that recognizes stock ticker symbols and labels them, essentially like is shown here, without the company name attribute value pair, but everything else is essentially correct. The other two are examples of extensibility. Some company could come along and build a recognizer, some code that labels a string like XY1234 as a part number. Someone else, maybe a CD shop on the web, could provide code that labeled names of albums, like Kid A, for example. In addition to all this labeling, there's a UI mechanism that's associated with smart tags. And the UI mechanism is very important because without having some UI for these things, users would not know what was labeled as a smart tag and what wasn't. And more importantly, they'd have no easy way to act on the things that were actually labeled as smart tags. So what I'm showing here are some screenshots from Word. And if you have a copy of Office 10, you can go turn stock ticker recognition on for yourself and type in these examples and see exactly what I show here. So I've typed a sentence like DCX is the symbol for Daimler Chrysler Corporation, just to pick a company at random. What you can see in bullet point 1 is that DCX has a dotted purple underline beneath it. That underline is there because while I was typing, DCX was recognized as a stock ticker symbol, and a stock ticker smart tag label was applied to it. The dotted underline says nothing other than that this string is special because it's been smart tagged. In the second bullet point, you can see that I've placed my mouse on the word DCX, placed the insertion point there. And when I did that, a button was revealed. The button has the icon on it for the universal symbol for information. So in this case, it's a purple eye on a button. If I press that button, then what's in the third bullet point is shown. In this case, a menu appears, and there are a number of things on that menu. The first thing on that menu is the friendly name for the label that's been applied. So in this case, DCX has been labeled as what we'll call to end users a financial symbol. The second thing you can see on that same line is what the string is that has the label applied to it. Below that, there are three items that we call actions. In this case, the three actions are I can look up a stock quote on Money Central, I can get a company report on Money Central, and I can also get recent news about this company on Money Central. All three of these actions would open the user's web browser, navigate them to a particular URL on the Money Central website, and pass in the identity of the stock ticker symbol that was labeled. So in this case, you'd get a stock quote on Microsoft, or get a company report about Microsoft, or get some recent news about Microsoft. Below those three things are a couple of items which are normally there. They're not actions. They're not customizable. One is to just remove that smart tag. So if for some reason the label wasn't correct, or I didn't want the label to appear, then I could just remove it using that menu item. And the last item is Smart Tag Options, which lets you do some customization of the Smart Tags feature. So as I've said, in Office 10, there are two applications that are Smart Tag savvy, Word and Excel. And in both these applications, while you type, things will be labeled as Smart Tags automatically in the background. This is on by default in Word, so when you type people's names, times, dates, stock ticker symbols, things like that, they'll be automatically labeled. In Excel, the feature is present, but it happens to be off by default. So if you want to use it in Excel, you simply have to turn it on. In addition to working in Word and Excel, though, the feature works in a slightly different way, more or less a limited way compared to Word and Excel, in Internet Explorer. So if I send a Word mail message using the HTML format, with Word being the default mail editor for Outlook in Office 10, and HTML format being the default mail format in Office 10, then when the recipient gets that mail message, if there were smart tags in it, those smart tags will be actionable because Outlook uses Internet Explorer to display the mail message, and we've built a component that plugs into Internet Explorer to display the dotted purple underline under strings that are smart tagged, to display the button when you hover over something that's smart tagged, and to allow users to execute actions such as getting information about a stock or getting a map, things like that. The portion of the feature that isn't available in Internet Explorer, however, is that nothing is recognized automatically. This is a feature that will exist in the next version of Internet Explorer. So IE6, which will be shipping in Whistler, will support the recognition of smart tags in web pages while they're being viewed. On the next slide, I'll show you a bitmap of the customization UI for smart tags, but here I'll just go over exactly what you can customize. Smart tags is fairly customizable. You can turn on and off the feature as a whole. You can decide whether or not the dotted purple underline appears. You can decide whether or not the smart tag button, which is the I button, appears. And in addition to being able to customize these things at the UI level, admins in large organizations can customize these through policy settings as well. So here's a bitmap of the Tools, Autocorrect Options, Smart Tags tab. So from here, I have control over the recognizers that are running. So in this case, it shows that I could recognize person names and dates and times and addresses and places and a number of other things. And some of these are on and some of them are off. So you have individual control over the sorts of strings that are recognized and labeled in your document, as well as control globally over whether you want anything labeled at all, and control over whether you want the UI for smart tags to appear. There might be scenarios where an administrator wants smart tags to be embedded in documents, but doesn't want the actions to be available for users. For instance, if they're using smart tags to do document indexing for knowledge management. There are also some options to rerun the smart tag check or remove smart tags from your document. One interesting option on this dialog is the More Smart Tags button. Pressing that will take you out to a Microsoft website on Office Update. And from there, we hope to make available a number of additional smart tag recognizers as they become available. We also hope to make available improvements to the set of recognizers and actions we're shipping in Office 10. So that leads nicely into the list of things which we are shipping recognizers for in Office 10. For English, we're shipping recognizers for people's names, dates, times like 4 p.m., places like New York City, addresses like 123 Main Street, Poughkeepsie, Illinois, phone numbers, and the final one is recent recipients of email. So people's names recognize all sorts of different names, names of celebrities, names of historical figures, names of people in your organization. It's a recognizer designed to generally label things that appear to be people's names. And as a result, it labels a number of things which might not help you as a user because of the actions that we're shipping. So this final recognizer labels the names of just people you sent mail to recently. So it's more likely to help you get your work done when paired with the actions that we're shipping in Office 10. We're also shipping two recognizers that are extensible. They're pluggable in the sense that they take particular files and do recognition based on the contents of those files. The first is something we call the smart tag list recognizer. You can specify lists of items in an XML file, and whatever's specified in that XML file will be labeled by this smart tag recognizer when the user works in Word or Excel, and it'll have the label applied to it that's specified in that XML file. So this is one way that companies can easily extend the smart tags feature. We happen to be using this recognizer to recognize smart tag stock ticker symbols. So it scales really well. We have a list of about 30,000 ticker symbols, and those are recognized in real time in the background while the user types. We also have a tool that we've built to enable you to use a graphical user interface to add lists to this recognizer and specify the terms that should be in those lists. The second recognizer is one we'll ship on Office Update, which lets people specify in context-free grammars things that should be recognized. This is a bit more powerful than the list recognizer because instead of just specifying lists of strings, you can specify patterns. For instance, I might want to recognize names of cars, and I might want to recognize them and include the model year after them. So I could list all of the names of cars paired with model years, like 87 Camaro, 88 Camaro, 89 Camaro, but eventually that gets to be a rather lengthy list. So instead, I could write an expression that said any 2- or 4-digit number followed by the name of a car is valid and should be labeled as an auto model name. This is something that's probably too sophisticated for the typical end user, but allows people in large organizations to customize smart tags with more flexibility than the list recognizer provides. Like the list recognizer, it uses XML files, which can be deployed to the user's machine without writing any code. Just simply put them in a particular directory, and smart tag recognition will happen based on the contents of that file. In terms of the actions that we're shipping for Office 10, they fall into a couple of broad categories. The first set of actions are related to tasks that you perform in Outlook. These are things like scheduling a meeting from a person's name, adding the name of a person to your contacts folder, inserting someone's address from your contacts folder into a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet. There are some that also pertain to Money Central. I've talked about stock quote lookup, getting information about a company, getting recent news about a company. But there's another one that's particular to Excel, which is to insert a web query. You can insert a refreshable web query into an Excel spreadsheet, which will allow you to get updates about a stock price just by refreshing the Excel spreadsheet. Finally, there are some that relate to information that's found on Expedia. So for an address or a place, you can get driving directions to and from that place, or simply find a map of that place as well. The most important thing about smart tags is not that we're shipping a number of recognizers and actions for those recognizers in the box, but that smart tags are extensible. We're going to have a public smart tag software development kit, which allows third parties to extend smart tags in ways particular to their organization or the way they work. So third parties can define their own types. They can define a part number type or a company employee type, anything they want. In addition to defining their own types, they can build recognizers for those types, build actions for those types, and by doing so, deploy solutions to their community of users that allow for deeper integration between Office documents and Office applications and data on the web or stored in other applications on the user's desktop. In addition, they can extend the existing types, things that we'll ship recognizers for in Office, such as people's names, times, dates, and places, by building new actions. For instance, you might want an action that looked up names of people in the company's address book, and that address book might be maintained by some database software package. So we won't ship an action to do that in Office 10 because we'd have no hope of knowing all of the different ways that queries could be issued and all of the different database packages that might maintain addresses. But someone within a particular organization could build an action to look up in a company's database software using their particular query the name of a person to find their address information and contact information within an organization. This slide briefly shows the architecture for smart tags. I'm not going to go into depth about it, but it's just important to know that there's an infrastructure, and the infrastructure is shared by Word and Excel, and also shared by Internet Explorer to the extent that actions work in Internet Explorer. This is important simply because it means that when someone goes to develop a solution on top of smart tags, they can develop in a way that's not specific to an application, but instead is general to all of the applications that implement smart tags. So they can do actions and recognizers that aren't tailored just to Excel or just to Word or just to Internet Explorer, but instead work in all of these environments. In terms of building recognizers, there's a sort of three-tier story for most likely third parties, independent software vendors, IT professionals within large organizations. At the easiest end is simply creating an XML file and plugging into the smart tag list recognizer that I described earlier. Very, very easy process. Simple XML format will provide a graphical tool. It's something that if you didn't have the graphical tool, you could very easily do in Notepad in a matter of minutes. Harder, but more flexible, is to build a context-free grammar. This requires a bit more sophistication because you have to understand the mechanisms associated with context-free grammars. But again, it's fairly straightforward because it's merely a matter of specifying the grammar and jotting it down in a particular XML file format. Again, something you could do in Notepad or an XML editor. The hardest, but clearly most flexible way of building a recognizer is to write some code. You can implement the smart tag API. We'll have a software development kit for that API, which will give examples in C, C++, VB. You can use your favorite high-level language to implement this API. And when you implement this API, you have the complete flexibility of COM. You can do whatever you want in a COM object. So you might want to do recognition based on doing database lookup in a SQL Server database, or querying a database found on the web through an active server page, though that would of course have performance implications because of the network delay, but something you could do if you chose to. You could perform custom pattern matching. You could build your own list recognizer. You can query information found on the user's machine. Essentially, whatever you can do with VB, C, C++, you can do in the context of a recognizer. There aren't limitations. And the way to think about what this API does is, while the user's typing, text that they're typing is being passed to this component, this recognizer, and the recognizer is able to do whatever it wants, use whatever mechanism it desires, to determine whether a smart tag label should be applied to that string or not, and if so, what the smart tag label is that should be applied. The second half of the feature, the action half, is similar to the recognition half in that there's a multi-tier story for development. The APIs for smart tags allow actions to be built for the Microsoft-defined types, people's names, times, dates, and so forth, as well as for types created by third parties, so that part number that a large organization might want. Easy to build actions for that, as well as for the ones Microsoft ships. The easiest solution for building an action is to just specify a URL in an XML file, the same sort of XML file used for recognition, and package up the data that's recognized and pass it off to that URL. So good examples of this are, if I wanted to look up data on one of the Microsoft web pages internally, I could write an action that knew about the sort of URL that was used and knew how to add a particular string that had been labeled, maybe a person's name, maybe it's the name of a product name, to that URL in order to open a valid web page on the MSW site, for instance. The harder and more flexible way of building actions is similar to the harder and more flexible way of building recognizers. You can go off and implement the smart tag API. This API will be documented as well as the recognizer API in the smart tag SDK. Like building a recognizer, you have complete freedom to do whatever you can do with COM, using VB, C, C++, your language of choice. One important thing to point out is that when doing this development, the actions actually get a hook into the object model of the document where the string with the smart tag label applied exists. So you can do things within the context of the document. You can modify the document, add content to the document. And a good example of this is one of the actions we're shipping in Office 10 allows you to insert someone's address simply by choosing the Insert Address item from the Smart Tag menu. And what that action does is takes the name, does a query into Outlook to find the person's address in your contacts folder, grabs that address, and actually inserts it into the document right below where the person's name was. So we make use of the object model pointer in this way to modify the document and save the user time by inserting the address rather than having them go through the numerous cut and paste steps and switch between applications. A common question about smart tags is, how can they be distributed? Well, the first thing to point out is that smart tags do require some client-side code. So a smart tag recognizer is a COM object that resides on the user's machine. And similarly, a smart tag action handler is client-side code, resides on the user's machine. That said, it's not terribly hard to distribute these things. And the reason is because they're easy to register, and a simple install package is usually all that's needed. But in addition to being fairly easy to deploy via an install package that might be found on the web or that an admin could deploy to the users that he's responsible for, there's one particular type of metadata that can be stored in documents along with the smart tags. That's something called a download URL. The purpose of the download URL is to enable an item that appears on the smart tag menu called check for new actions. This works in documents, web pages, Excel spreadsheets, email messages, all of the places that normal actions work. And the purpose of check for new actions is in scenarios where a document travels from one person who has a particular set of smart tag recognizers and actions to another person who doesn't have that set of recognizers and actions. The recipient of the document might want to make use of those smart tags even though they don't have them. And without this mechanism, that person would be a bit out of luck. Certainly they could go back and ask the author of the document, well, where do I get that smart tag recognizer? Or what are the actions that are available for this, and where did you get them? But the Check for New Actions menu item makes this much easier because the user simply selects Check for New Actions, and the browser is opened to a web page embedded in the document as the download URL. And from there, whoever wrote the smart tag recognizers and actions is able to provide a download package. So you're just a couple of clicks away from getting the set of smart tags on your machine that were embedded in the document by the first person who authored the document. Smart tags are really about extensibility, and as a result, the big push within Office is to find partners and to have partners that we're working with by the time we launch. In fact, we already have a number of partners lined up, and if you saw the Comdex Bill G keynote and the Office demo that was part of that, you probably saw the demo from West Group. But in addition to West, we have a number of groups internal to Microsoft, MSN Search, Money Central, Expedia, and a number of other people that we're talking to about building smart tag recognizers, building smart tag actions. Some of these are in the consumer space, others are in the small business space, people like B Central. There are a number of external groups in addition to West as well, Reuters, LexisNexis, and it's important to point out that we're really interested in having more partners on board. So if you know of anyone who might be interested in partnering to do smart tag development and would be willing to have something ready by the time of the Office launch, by all means send me email at jreynar. I'll wrap up here by telling you about some of the scenarios that I think are important to large organizations. If you sit down for a few minutes and brainstorm about the kinds of data that large organizations manipulate, you'll probably find that every large organization has some data that's amenable to smart tag recognition and manipulation later with smart tag actions. But just to give you some examples, you might want to label the names of customers or companies that you partner with as a large organization. And then after you've labeled them, provide actions like looking them up in your customer relations management software, or checking information in a sales database. For instance, how much have we sold to this company recently? Have they paid their bills on time? You might also benefit from labeling names of your products or your part numbers or products that your company buys from suppliers regularly. And you might do this to enable your salespeople or people who manage your purchasing process to check stock on particular parts, or check the sales history of a particular part, or maybe even start an invoice to start a transaction involving a particular part or product. You can also leverage people's names, dates, and places in ways that are particular to the organization. Maybe you have a database used by the HR department, and names of employees are important for looking things up in that database. Dates, maybe you want to use those to check sales history by date, or look at number of customers by date, manipulate all sorts of business-specific data that revolves around the calendar. Places, the same sort of thing. Maybe it's package tracking or delivery costs, things like this. And finally, there are a number of e-commerce scenarios that are potentially important as well. You can imagine web retailers wanting to label names of products and offer users the opportunity to buy those products with essentially a single click from a document, particularly a mail message. That's probably the most important scenario for that. So to conclude, Smart Tags is a feature of Office 10. It's present in Word, Excel, and to some extent Internet Explorer, and as a result, present in email as well. It really has two halves, recognizers. They're components that label strings in Office documents and mail messages and apply category information to those strings. Once something has been recognized, the second half of the feature, the action half, kicks in. Actions give users options about how to manipulate labeled strings. And the goal of all of this is to save users time, make them more productive, make their work easier to accomplish, and make them more successful. And in the process, make the integration between Office and the other tools that they use to do their work tighter. It's important to point out finally that this is completely extensible by third parties and will have an SDK available by the time we ship. Thanks for coming today.